Okay,
Quite
thank
clear.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I thought, like the honeybee, over the past few weeks, our journey through the Karma Yoga, guided by Sri Ramana Maharshi, we'll just look at the salient points. I'm not going into the intricacies because we have explored the intricacies also. Just to recollect the salient points, I'd like to begin with a small story just to understand why Karma Yoga is important and why Jnana Yoga is important. Because Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi says, whether you start with Karma Yoga, or you start with Bhakti Yoga, or you start with Kriya Yoga, or you start with Raja Yoga, whichever path appeals to us or whichever stage we may be in at that point in our sadhana, all stages will come and culminate in Atma Vichara, in self-enquiry. And then through self-enquiry, we are established in the self permanently, in our true nature. So why are all these preliminary yogas important? So here in the story, Samartha Ramdas, he is the spiritual guru of Shivaji Maharaj. I think most of us will know about him. So in this story, actually true story we are looking at, Samartha Ramdas is giving a discourse. He's giving a discourse in a town, and a lot of people are sitting and listening to him. And during the discourse, he is talking about his own experience, his experience of deep bliss, because he is established in the self. He is telling everybody in the audience, nothing that you have experienced so far can compare to this, because this is the most sublime bliss, and it is there all the time. It doesn't come and go like the pleasures and happiness of the outer world. We get something we like and we are happy. We lose something we like, or we don't get what we want, we become unhappy. It comes and goes. But the state I am in, it doesn't come and go. It is there all the time. I'm always happy. So at the end of the discourse, one lady, a Maharashtrian lady who was listening to all this, she says, Swamiji, can I ask you a question? So he says, yes, please. She says, I also want this anubhuti that you are talking about, this bliss. Can you give me this bliss? So he says, he doesn't answer directly. He tells her, kheer is a kind of pudding we make with, it's a sweet we make with milk. And she says, yeah, of course I know how to make kheer. So he says, I'm very fond of kheer. So today evening, you make some kheer and bring it to me. Then I will tell you about this bliss, how to get it. So this lady is very excited. Kheer takes a long time. It's like basundi, you have to go on stirring milk, and it keeps condensing till it becomes very thick. So she makes the kheer and she brings it. She has to climb up a hill. He's sitting on top of a hill on a rock. And then he's looking, he watches her come. She's coming with the kheer, holding it and bringing it. And he quickly goes to a very dirty pool, a rock pool which is there on the hill, stagnant rainwater is standing there. He fills his kamandalu, his water vessel. You can see he's holding it in the picture. So he fills that water vessel with this dirty water, and he comes back to sit on the rock. The lady has come, very tasty, nice smelling kheer. So Ramdas says, please put it into my kamandalu so that I can drink it. The lady is looking into the kamandalu. It has very dirty water, dirt is floating on it, the color of the water is black, it has moss. And she says, Master, please give me that kamandalu. I will go and wash it. There is a river stream a little away from here. I will wash it, make it clean, and then I'll put the kheer. So he says, no, 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 no. I want the kheer. You just pour it into my vessel. Pour it into my kamandalu and I will drink it only from this as it is. I don't want you to throw away this water or clean it or anything. Just pour it into my vessel and I will drink it. She says, you're asking me to do this kind of thing. My mind doesn't, my conscience doesn't permit it. How can I pour this wonderful kheer? I have spent 5 hours making it. It's so tasty. It's so delicious. And pour it into this dirty water. The kheer will get spoiled. And if you drink it, it might make you sick also. I really can't do this. So he says, for 5 hours of effort, you stirred the milk for 5 hours to get this much kheer. I have worked for decades to get this bliss. Can I pour this pure bliss into a dirty vessel? Do some karma yoga, do some bhakti yoga, chant the name of God, purify the mind. Let all the selfish vasanas go away. Let your mind become pure. Let it become focused. Ramana Maharshi has a beautiful definition for Chit Shuddhi. I was awestruck by that beautiful definition. Very short, very beautiful definition. He says, normally, your mind will keep on, your attention will keep on shifting from subject to subject, from thought to thought, from emotion to emotion. So that is a mind that does not have enough Chitta Shuddhi. But a pure mind, a mind that has Chitta Shuddhi, is capable of focusing on a single thought for any length of time. He calls it Eka Chintana. Eka, single, Chintana, thought. So from Bahu Chintana, many different thoughts, we move to Ekas for any length of time on one single thought. The form of God is a thought. The name of God is a thought. The understanding, I am Brahman, I am the self, is a thought. So you remove a thorn with another thorn. You remove all thoughts, unnecessary thoughts, damaging thoughts, thoughts that might bring unpleasant karmic fruits, thoughts that might hurt us and others. All that we remove with one single thought of our choice, whatever inspires us. Take that thought, develop the ability to keep the mind focused effortlessly. That effortlessly has to be underlined. Effortlessly on that one single thought, that is called Chitta Shuddhi. When we sit down for meditation, sometimes the mind is able to focus so beautifully, and then mind is silent. It's so blissful that day we don't feel like coming out of the meditative state, but sometimes we need to come out to attend to responsibilities. On other days, we have so much time, we have planned, today I'm going to sit down and meditate. I will not put a limit. I have a lot of time today. And we sit down and we close our eyes. Thoughts. Bombardment of thoughts. Peace, thought. Peace, thought. So, Chitta Shuddhi. In order to remove the dirt, The dirt is nothing but the tendency of the mind to not be able to focus on the self, not to remain there. So for that, to come to that state where we can remain effortlessly focused, we need to do karma yoga, we need to do bhakti yoga, we need to do any other kind of yoga, like iron ore or gold ore or diamond ore. You need to remove whatever is not the diamond or not the gold and take out the pure metal, gold or silver or whatever. So just recollecting from shlokas 1 to 5, we learned that all our instruments of action, body, mind, intellect, they are powered by the self, which is everywhere all the time. Even right now, whatever we are doing and whatever the body is doing, mind is doing, intellect is doing, it is all powered by the, being powered by the self, even right now, in the present moment as we sit here. So we have these three instruments. From the body, we get into physical action, mind thinks, so thoughts and emotions are generated by the mind. Intellect analyzes, it decides, it chooses, and every single act we do is aligned to an ideal. We may not be aware of it at that time, but every act that we do has an ideal. You can start analyzing and watching from today. Even if I do something like going and working for 5 minutes in the garden, how will I pull out the weeds? I don't want them there, but am I doing it with a thought of love? I'm sorry, I need to pull you out. May your evolution progress. So it is an ideal. I don't want to hurt. So even in the act of pulling out a weed, I'm doing it with love. So every single act, or somebody else may just pull it out. These are horrible things. I don't want them there. Nothing wrong with this or right with that. But the closer we are to the state of love in our internal state of being, the better every action works. So we also learned that a physical act and mental act and the intellectual act, an action, thought, ideal, have their own karmic fruits. Physical act has less weight in karmic fruit. Mental, that means thought and emotion, the thought and emotion that are accompanying the action that I'm doing can bring me negative or positive karma, which is has much greater weightage than the physical karma. And the intellect will generate an ideal for every action, which will decide my inner state of being. That will have the greatest weightage. So the karmic fruit of an act is a sum total of all three actions: physical, mental, and intellectual. So Bhagavan is saying being is more important than doing. If you are in the right state of being, everything gets done really well, and this benevolence is flowing from us towards everybody around us and towards ourselves. So the minute we forget that being is important and we get involved only in doing, then it begins a chain which we call the karmic cycle. So karmic cycle, we have our own past actions. The sum total of this, the entire collection of our past actions, is called Sanchita Karma. That decides, we bring down a little bit of it into the present lifetime, and it decides our present destiny, what is going to happen to me in the present or in this present lifetime. That is the Prarabdha Karma. And as we experience our Prarabdha Karma, we are performing new actions influenced by that. If somebody is being mean to me, if I am mean back to that person, I'm sowing new seeds prompted by old karmic vasanas. My new seeds are again same kind of seeds I'm sowing, so I will get the same kind of fruit in the future. So what I do today will decide my fate in the future. So that is called Agami Karma, the karmic fruit that is yet to come but is being decided by every action that we are doing right now. The problem in this is we are unable to control the body, mind, and intellect every moment. Now and then, maybe a good part of the day, maybe we control, say like 30%, 40%. The other 50, 60% of the day, the mind will think its own thoughts, it will generate its own emotions. The intellect will, prompted by old vasanas, it may come up with ideals which are not in conformity with universal love. So I'm getting a mixed bag of karma always, which will, a good part of the time at least, which will make it difficult for me to predict the results of my action. And even if I get the predicted result, I have learned over all my experiences in life that it is temporary. It will come, it will stay for a while, and then it will not give me the same amount of joy that it gave me when I first got it. In fact, sometimes it can even give me sorrow later. So being is the most important state. To be in I am. We also did I am meditation. Today also we will do it. So to be centered in the being, I am the self. In the awareness, I am the self. I am unlimited. I am Satchidananda. As children, actually, we are intuitively centered there. That's why we find children being very joyous, very joyful. But slowly, society will start superimposing its belief systems, its conditioning on us, and we start giving more importance to doing. So in the state of doing, if it emerges from being and then we get action, then it is a very beautiful state because you're always centered in the self, in your true nature. Outside, whatever is happening spontaneously. It is not that I am doing it, it is just happening through the instruments of action. But if we start, every action will demand more action. Every action will demand some more actions. We went into this. Suppose I have to work for an event. So I start with the event. Now I have to plan the event. I have to get so many different things for it. I have to contact so many people. And then I have to make it all come together. I need money for this. So for that, I have to go for donations. So action will sow more actions, will sow more actions, will sow more actions. That is why Bhagwan is saying, Kriti Mahodadhav, it becomes a whole ocean of action. It has become a whole ocean of action, but as you see, still being is there. The importance of being is remembered. I am aware, inner state of being is important. But if I become more and more involved in the action and I start forgetting the state of being, if I start forgetting, now that being was there, my attention was there, that icon over there, it only suggests that my attention is on being. Even though I am doing, I am aware that state of being is most important. So I am retaining my benevolent state of doing and I'm engaging in action. But at some point of time, I forget that state of being is important. I start engaging mainly in doing. I forget my true nature. Then what happens? This is what Bhagwan calls downfall. Downfall from where? Only within ourselves. Forgetting that I am bliss, becoming unaware that I am bliss. I am always bliss. But suddenly my awareness slips. I forget that I am bliss. And then I get caught in this ocean of action. And getting caught in this ocean of action without being consciously connected to my inner state of being, the opposite starts happening. Whatever I'm doing will start influencing my being. Something unpleasant happens, inside I start feeling sad, angry, frustrated, jealous. Earlier, my being was benevolent always, and my doing came out from benevolence. But when I forgot and doing started influencing being, then Bhagwan calls it a downfall. Downfall for whom? For us, because inside we have lost that happiness. we have lost that infinitude. We have become trapped in the finite concept that I am the BMI. Then what happens? We become trapped in the ocean of karma. Karma, cause and remedy. I am the doer as long as I believe I am the body, mind and intellect, and I act from that belief. Then I feel I am doing that action. So the fruit should come to me. Therefore, it generates karma or karmic fruit, and it traps us in the illusion that, what is the illusion? The next thing that I do, that will give me permanent happiness. Now, yes, what I did just now made me happy for some time. Whatever I've done till now, it has made me happy just for a little bit. But you know, the very next thing that I do, after that you should say, I'll be so peaceful. I'm going to be so happy. And that thing is also done, still it leaves us thirsty. Drops of water can't quench a raging thirst. The thirst has to go. The thirst will go only when we realize there is Amrita inside. I am bliss. If I look outside, that is an illusion. When I turn inwards and I realize my true nature, that is the truth. So what is the cause remedy for that? Bhagavan said, Na ichchaya, without expectation. So work without expectation. That means I don't want the results of the fruit, even when we do something joyously. Somebody enjoys painting or somebody enjoys singing. You're not singing for somebody and expecting appreciation. You're just sitting on your own in your bedroom or in your house and you're singing. You're totally enjoying the singing. Then you don't have any other expectation. That itself is, you're not looking for any other result from it. So when you love what you do, and that love of work itself is giving you joy, you're not looking for any other result from that. So that is also Nishkama Karma, doing it for the joy of doing it. And offering results. Of course, serving society without expectation also comes under Na Ichchaya Kritam. Offering the results of our action to God, to feel that everything that I do, let the results go to God. I will do what has to be done. That's it. I'm not going to expect anything from it. Whatever comes from it, I give it to God. So that is called Prasada Buddhi. Whatever God wants, He will give it to me as Prasada. God is like my mother. God is like my father. So parents don't want to harm their children, right? So parents will always give something that is good for the child. So like that, I have that complete trust in God, complete faith in God. Whatever I get from my action, whatever is the result, I offer it to God. And whatever God gives me, I receive it with Prasada Buddhi. Prasada Buddhi means whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. Everything is Prasada for me. So I'm not going to analyze. I'm not going to react by saying, I want this, I don't want this. I'm just going to say, whatever you give me, it is delicious. It is blissful. It is Prasada for me. It is for my own growth. So I will receive it joyfully and I will accept it joyfully. So that is Prasada Buddhi, or offering action to God. When we do either of these things, then it purifies the mind, because we don't have a selfish motive. So the mind becomes purer and purer. When we do an action with any of this kind of attitude, either without expectation or offering results to God, or just enjoying it for the sake of doing it, it does not bring fresh karma to us. It ends there. It does not sow seeds for future fate or destiny, and it leads us towards salvation. So this is what Bhagavan told us. Which sadhana is more effective? Janki Ramji said using all three, but that is necessarily not what Bhagwan is telling us. He's saying, understand that using the mind and intellect for sadhana is better than using speech, which is better than using the body. So in this order, the subtler the instrument used for the sadhana, the more powerful is the result of the sadhana. The greater is the momentum in cleansing the mind. So using mind and intellect is better than using speech, which is better than using the body. So using mind and intellect, we can do contemplation and meditation, manana, nitidhyasa. Manana is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasa is the Vedic concept of learning for a sadhak. I listen to the truth of Vedanta through my Sadguru. He is telling me, so I am listening. And then I contemplate. That means I use those teachings. In the light of those teachings, I am very objectively examining my own belief systems, my own conditioning. And I allow the light of the teaching to cleanse, to remove, to delete all the wrong belief systems, all the conditioning which was disempowering to me, which was actually a hurdle in my path. I allow the teaching because I have faith in the teaching, because I have examined the teaching, I have found it to be making sense to me. I allow the teaching to light up all the filth that is in my mind and get rid of it one by one. That is contemplation. Meditation is, or nididhyasa, is to guard, safeguard the awareness. Nidhi is treasure. Dhyasa means to protect, to safeguard. So I'm safeguarding the treasure of awareness. What awareness? Of my true nature. I am Satchidananda, I am bliss, I am infinite. That is my true nature, that is who I am. So that knowledge I safeguard. All the time I safeguard. That means I have it somewhere in my mind. Even when I am doing other things, it is there at the back of my mind. And whenever my mind is free, I bring it to the foreground. So that is contemplation and meditation. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasa. Using...
Bhavani, can you please see the chat for a minute, or can I ask a question?
Yeah, please ask a question.
See, this I am Satchidananda, I am bliss. Now with COVID-19 going around everywhere, people suffering and people have lost so many things and such uncertainties, how can anybody be in that state?
See, there was a king and he told his minister, wherever I go, I don't want thorns and stones to poke my feet. So every time I leave my palace, make sure you spread a soft carpet wherever I'm going to walk, in the forest or in the streets or in the fields. When I go to inspect my kingdom, make sure that a soft carpet is spread. Then the minister said, O king, how can I keep spreading soft carpets wherever you go? I will need too many carpets. It's not practical. Instead of that, I will get soft footwear made for you. You wear that footwear. So whether you're walking on stones or on thorns or wherever you're walking, still you are on soft ground. So what Vedanta is telling us is, if we give more importance to what is happening around us, I'm not saying COVID is not challenging, or many of us get very challenging situations in our lives. So that is why if you say the whole world should become beautiful, be pleasant to me all the time, it is like the king saying, put soft carpet wherever I go. It's not a practical thing. So what is a practical thing is you wear footwear, protective footwear. And what is that protective footwear? That protective footwear is the awareness of my true nature. It is a very practical teaching. Outside it may be 45 degrees, burning hot. I'm sitting in a cool AC room. Outside temperature can become anything, but inside I remain cool. So this Satchitananda, realizing your true nature, is the most practical method. I have no control over what happens outside. It may be COVID, it may be something else. I may lose a job, I may lose a dear one. If COVID comes and if that becomes okay, we still have other challenges. No, it will keep on coming. So life will keep on throwing challenges at you. Why? Because the cosmos wants you to turn inward. The cosmos wants all of us to realize your true nature is this. So this kind of pandemics, one of the reasons they may be coming is to make us turn inward, to come to existential questions. But if we still refuse and we say we want the outside world to be covered with a soft carpet, when I'm always having this wonderful soft footwear called awareness of my true nature, that will protect me not only from COVID situation. I'm not saying it will protect me from getting the infection or something, but whether the infection comes or not. Ramana Maharshi had cancer, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had cancer, but that did not dilute their bliss, isn't it? They had great challenges. If you read the life of Ramana Maharshi, such great challenges he had to face. We will look at it sometime. But in spite of that, he always remained blissful. Not only he remained blissful, he was able to give bliss to so many people. He was able to guide so many people on the path. So Shankaracharya says, when somebody asks, isn't it selfish to focus on the search for self-knowledge when there is so much, what shall we say, trauma in the outer world? He says the greatest seva that you can do is search for self-knowledge. You can give others only what you have. So if you become established in the self, if you are established in the bliss of the self, you are able to give that bliss and peace to other people. So whether there is COVID or whether there is any other kind of challenge in life, the permanent remedy, the permanent answer is to be established in the self. It is not an abstract concept. It is a very, very practical concept that when you are aware all the time that you are bliss, it doesn't matter what happens outside. You are still always bliss. Life brings challenges, you are bliss. Life brings good things, you are bliss. There is no change in the inner state of being. So it is like being in an AC room. It is like wearing soft cushioning footwear, even when you are going over rough ground. That tomorrow it will be something else, day after tomorrow it will be something else. It is true that it seems mind-boggling because the whole world is going through it and it's a big change for us. But remember, we had something like Chaturmasya also earlier. During rainy seasons, people would sit at home after the sowing is over. For 3 months, 4 months, the focus would be on being inward. But nowadays we have forgotten that. So when we are at home now, we have time to focus on turning inward. We can use this situation as a launching pad either for self-knowledge or for self-pity. There is suffering, there is death, people are in unhappiness. So if we have immeasurable love within us by being anchored in the self, then that love can flow out to everybody. So there is no greater solution, there is no more permanent solution than being anchored in the self. Does that answer the question?
Thank you very much. Very nice. Excellent.
Boniji, a small clarification, please.
Yeah.
The Karma Yoga Ishvara Arpanam Prasada Buddhi.
Yeah.
In Ishvara Arpanam, the action itself is offered to the God or the result is offered to God?
As we were talking last time, the whole thing is a progression. The Karma Yoga is a progression from being totally self-centered to becoming completely other-centered.
Okay.
So in that progression, initially you may say, I'm offering the fruit of this to God.
Okay.
You're still retaining the doership, because
Yes.
you're identifying with body, mind, intellect, and you're saying, I'm
Okay.
doing this act, but because I have learned that
Yes.
having expectation
Yes.
makes me disappointed when that expectation is not met.
Yes.
So I will get over this having expectation by
Yes.
offering fruit to God.
Okay.
Then
Okay.
slowly, as mind gets more and more refined, you understand that body, mind, and intellect are also not belonging to you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That is also created by the Lord, managed by the Lord, maintained by the Lord.
Yes. Yes.
So whatever is done by the Lord for the Lord.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So that is the next progression.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So shall I proceed or shall I proceed with the talk?
Yes, please.
Okay. So using the body, we can engage in ritualistic worship of any different religion. I've just put Puja Havan as an example for Hinduism. It can be every religion may have its own kinds of ritual. Even facing in a certain direction and doing namaz in a certain way is also a ritual. So using the body, you do a sadhana that Bhagwan is saying. He's not saying drop whatever you are doing, but he's just setting the scale in front of us, that's all. Saying just understand the scale, that whatever is more subtle has a greater capacity to transform you than what is more gross. So see how you want to allocate your time. If ritualistic worship is important to you and you don't feel like dropping it, doesn't matter, continue with it, but also add some sadhana with speech, also add some sadhana with intellect. But if this ritualistic worship has dropped away from you, then good, focus on speech. If speech has dropped away and you're using mind and intellect, wonderful, just continue with mind and intellect. So whatever we are doing, to keep the scale in mind so that we can balance. Then here we have the self. I have not put any box for the self if you look at the slide. The entire slide, the entire screen is the self, because the self is everywhere all the time. So that is the self. Now Bhagwan said, Jagata Ishadi Yukta Sevanam. Ashtamurti Bhrid Deva Pujanam. So the whole Jagat, the whole creation, whole cosmos is a manifestation of the self. Self is unmanifest. It cannot be gauged by the senses or mind or intellect. But creation is the manifest body. It's the form of the self. And Bhagwan says it is the 8-limbed form. So for 8 limbs, he told us 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, earth; sun, which symbolizes the intellect; moon, which symbolizes the mind; Purusha, we say, oh hidden light, vibrant in every atom; oh hidden life, shining in every creature. So that consciousness which enlivens all matter, that is called Purusha. So all these together, the 5 elements make up 5: intellect, mind, and Purusha. If you look at the microcosm, that is our own BMI, again, we have all these in the microcosm. If you look at the macrocosm as the entire universe, again, you have all these in the macrocosm also. So whatever we do, basically, which is related to 5 elements, related to intellect, related to mind, related to the consciousness, any activity that we do can become a act of worship, act of service. What makes it an act of service? Just the awareness that everything, because consciousness permeates every single atom of creation. The self is there in every single atom of creation. Therefore, it is in every mind, it is in every intellect. First, I'm saying I am not the BMI, just to realize I am not just this BMI, only this one BMI. I am all creatures, I am all bodies, I am all matter, I am the entire cosmos, and I am the self from which this whole cosmos has flowed down. So when we have that understanding, it should be an understanding inside us, deep understanding. So when it becomes a deep understanding within us, then every action that we do is done by God, for God, through God. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavihi, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaiva tena gantavyam, Brahma karma samadhina. Brahman is the fire, Brahman is the food, Brahman is the one who offers, Brahman is the one who receives. Everything is Brahman, everything is the self. So with that deep understanding, after manana, after shravana, after nididhyasa, when a seeker understands, then every single act becomes an act of worship. So that is what Bhagavan said in the 5th shloka. So this is a summary of what we have done during the past few sessions. As I said, I have looked only at the salient points. I have not gone into intricacies. So today, with Bhagavan's grace, we begin Bhakti Yoga. Let us chant Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Asatoma Satkamaya together before we begin the new shlokas. Om Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us offer our pranams to the lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi and to all the Sadgurus who inspire us. May their grace and blessings be with us always and light the lamp of the self within us. So, Upadesha Saram, Shloka 6. I will chant one line, then we can all chant together. Uttamastavad Uchchamandatah, Uttamastavad Uchchamandatah, Chittajam Japa Dhyanamuttamam, Chittajam Japa Dhyanamuttamam. Stavad. Stavad means praise, like chanting a Sahasranama or an Ashtotra. We are chanting different names of the Lord. That means we are eulogizing. We are praising the deity whom we are worshipping by chanting different names which set out different qualities of that deity, different lakshanas. So stavad means praise, hymns of praise. Uttamaha stavad, Uttamastavad, Uchcha Mandataha. So he's saying better than Uttamastavad is Japa. Uchcha Mandataha means loud and soft. But before we come to that, Bhagavan is saying better than long hymns of praise. That means not that you should not chant a Sahasranama or you should not chant the Purusha Sukta or anything like that. It is like when we are chanting a Sahasranama or we are chanting a long hymn, it is like a buffet. You go to a wedding buffet, they may have, if it is a very, very elaborate buffet, they may even have 50 items there. And definitely the stomach that we have, however big it may be, cannot accommodate 50 items. So what do? We take a quick round. Oh, masala dosa is here, parathas are here, biryani is here, chaat is here, South Indian food is here, continental food is there. We do a survey. Then after that, we make choices. This is better for me than that. I like this better than that. This I will take for nutrition. This I will take for taste. Out of these 10 different sweets, I will take 2, or I will take 1, or I will take 3. So like that, a hymn is a buffet. All the aspects of the deity whom we adore, we are chanting all the aspects. It's a Shanta Murti, Ananda Murti. As I chant that hymn, some particular mantra within that, some particular characteristic, that will attract me, it will pull me like a magnet. And then I'll start feeling, I can say that again and again and again. It's so beautiful. Ananda, 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 or Shanti, Shanti. It keeps on attracting me. So out of that buffet of the hymn, we have selected one aspect that is pulling us like a magnet. And that becomes our Japa mantra. Or Japa mantra can also be given by the Sadguru. Even according to brain science, short phrases repeated many times, it creates a synergy between left and right hemispheres of the brain. When we chant long mantras or long hymns, it is activating the left brain more, the language center. But when we take one single mantra which is short, like Om Namah Shivaya or Om Namo Narayanaya or whatever, or just Om, and we keep repeating it, and there is this flow of devotion, flow of love from the heart. Love, devotion, everything is from the right brain. Single words, short phrases also activate the right brain. And because there is word content in that, there is language content in that, and there is repetition, it activates the left brain. So when we keep on repeating a mantra like that, both hemispheres will work in synergy. What does that mean? Mind starts focusing. Eka Chintana. Chitta Shuddhi. Remembering the definition of Ramana Maharshi. We get Eka Chintana. We start being able to focus on one single thought. So better than long hymns of praise is a japa of a short mantra. And in that japa also, there are more effective and less effective ways of doing it. Uchcha mandataha, uchcha loud, mandataha soft. So better soft than loud. I can say Rama, Rama, or I can say Rama, Rama, Rama. When children are small, they're just learning to read. We tell them, read loudly. Or the mother or father is busy in the kitchen or somewhere outside the room where the child is studying. Read loudly so that I can hear your studying properly. As the child becomes more mature, we tell the child, my dear, you don't have to read so loudly. No, read softer. You'll strain your voice and you'll disturb other people. Read softly. Then, when the child is even more mature, we tell the child, you don't have to read aloud at all. That was for when you were small. Now you're a big boy, you're a big girl. You know how to read very well. So sit down, read in your mind. Read softly. Don't move your lips. Don't vocalize. Read in your mind. Because you have acquired the ability to focus even when you don't verbalize. So read in your mind. So we often wonder, is the sadhana that I'm doing the best kind of sadhana? Or is the way in which I'm practicing it the best way? So here very clearly Ramana is telling us, better than a long hymn of praise, go for a repetition of a short mantra, that is japa. So even in japa, in the beginning you may need concentration, so you're saying it loudly. As you get more and more concentration, soft repetition is better. More than soft repetition, my mental repetition. Why? We are going from gross to subtle. Using the body, we do puja, chant a Sahasranama, we do a puja also. Then using only speech, we are repeating the name that we like or the mantra given to us by the Guru loudly, using speech. Then that same speech we are using softly. Then many people just moving the lips there. So they're only moving their lips, no sound is coming out. Then using the mind, more subtle instrument. Speech is subtler than body. Mind is subtler than speech. So the same sadhana is not changed. It is still japa only. Bring it to a more subtle instrument so that it can become more powerful for you. It can purify faster. So chitta jam. Chitta, it is mind. Chitta is also heart. So mentally you are repeating the mantra. And as you keep repeating, Valmiki, what did he do when Narada came and told him, your sins are too much. Since your family is also not ready to share in your sins, start doing the japa of Rama. To say Rama. So he was told, say Mara, Mara, Mara. Mara means tree in Kannada. I don't know how far that actually happened. So keep saying Rama, 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 Rama. When Valmiki started, he didn't know who Rama is. He didn't have devotion for Rama. He didn't have love for Rama. Narada has told me, I am repeating. So somebody tells us japa is good, you start doing. But as you do, you get more and more involved, you understand what you're chanting, and you have a great love towards the deity or Aham Brahmasmi if you're chanting, towards the self. Whatever is your concept of God, you have more and more love developing, love flowing from you. Just listening to that, you have love for it. Then what happens? Chitta also means heart. Chitta, jam. Jam, to be born from the heart. It is no longer born from the throat, no longer born from the tongue, no longer born from the lips, no longer born from the mind. Mind, I'm using my japamala, I'm chanting, mentally I'm chanting. Okay, is 108 over or not? I'll just open my eyes little bit and peek, no? How many more bits? Oh, so many are there. Mind. When you love somebody, when you care deeply for somebody, when you adore somebody, spontaneously that person's name will come from. You don't have to remember. It comes, it emerges, it is born from the heart. So if japa can be born from the heart, out of love for whatever it is that you're adoring. So from deep love, if the japa emerges spontaneously on its own, that is actually called ajapa japa. We think continuously chanting it in the mind while doing anything else, it is good. but that is not the actual meaning of ajapa japa. Ajapa japa means spontaneously it is emerging, not out of effort, but because of the state of being, it is just emerging. So that is the ultimate japa, Bhagavan says. But even better than this kind of japa, dhyanam uttamam. Meditation is even more effective than chittajam japa. Why? Meditation, we are also including the intellect. In japa, we were including speech, body, and heart and mind. But when it came to dhyana, dhyana means all that is not me is removed. All that which is not me. Actually, if you, in Hinduism, you have this puja mantra. You are offering a flower to the deity. You are saying, Namama, na mama, not mine. This flower is not mine. This body is not mine. This mind is not mine. This intellect is not mine. So the intellect has to come in when we have to drop false ownership, illusion of ownership. The belief that I am the body, mind, and intellect. Then the intellect will enter that dimension, that is dhyana. So that kind of dhyana is far more powerful. It purifies you much faster. So it is like you have a vessel of rice, raw rice, you want to wash it. I'll take 1 drop of water. I can wash little, not much. I'll take 1 small glass of water, large quantity of rice. I can wash a little, still not much. Then I fill that vessel with water and I throw out that water, but still there is dirt inside. If I hold it under a tap of running water and I can keep washing it, keep washing it, keep washing it, fill, pour, all the dirt is gone. So that intellect is like that. Physical body, drop of water. Speech, glass of water. Mentally repeating japa or chittajam japa, you are filling it up and throwing out the water. But if it is intellect that has come in, very fast, continuous stream of water is there, and you keep purifying, throwing out, purifying, throwing out. Finally, self-knowledge is only letting go of what I am not, that's all. I'm already that. I'm already Satchitananda. I'm already the self. That is why it is so practical. You're not getting something which you are not from outside. You're already that. Every single person is already that. Anybody you see in the world is already that. The Jnani knows he is that. The Ajnani does not know he is that. So the difference is only in awareness. That's all. It's not something new you're getting. So Bhagavan says it is self-recognition, not even self-realization. You recognize, this is who I have been all the time. This is me. In an objective type question paper, what do? They give us 4 different answers for one question. So we have studied, when we look at the 4 answers, if somebody had asked us, which is the capital of Haryana, or we may not remember. But if I see the answer there with 3 other answers, I recognize it as the correct answer. So recognition. It is self-recognition. I have been this always. Why did I not realize? What are you realizing? That you were that always. You are that even now. You will be that forever. So that recognition has to happen. So that recognition happens when we let go of what we are not. That's all. Only thing that has to be done is let go of wrong beliefs that I am the BMI. So I just wanted to share one story. This is not a story. It is the actual experience of Poonjaji. Poonjaji, you may have heard, Hari Vamshlal Poonjaji. He passed away in 97. He was a disciple of Ramana Maharshi. He became an enlightened master. If you're watching the videos of Mooji on YouTube, many of you may be watching. Mooji is a disciple of Poonjaji. So Poonjaji, how Japa helped him to come to the level of self-enquiry, and how self-enquiry helped him to get established in the self. We'll just look briefly at the story of Poonjaji, and then I think for today we will take some questions and do some meditation and wind up, because it's already now 7:10. So Poonjaji he was born in Punjab, the part of Punjab which has now become Pakistan. This was in the pre-independent days that we are talking about. And from a very young age, Poonjaji was at the age of 8, he describes an experience. He says, one day I was 8 and I was sitting in the midst of a family gathering at home. I was drinking a glass of juice when all of a sudden I was in bliss. Great peace, great bliss. I'm still hearing what is happening around me. I'm still aware of everything that is happening around me. But within me, there is absolute bliss and peace. And he was in this kind of state for about 2 days at the age of 8. His mother was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, and she understood her son is going through some kind of spiritual awareness. So she taught him at the end of those 2 days, she taught him Krishna mantra, and she gave him a photo of baby Krishna. And Poonjaji started repeating the name of Krishna. 8-year-old boy, he's repeating the name of Krishna. Very soon, his love for Krishna was so great that Krishna started appearing in visions, and he started playing with him. Now, Vedanta also throws light on Pratyaksha, or we say in Kannada, Bhagavanta Pratyakshada, or the Lord manifested in front of me. So Vedanta says, when mind acquires the quality of Ekachintana, when it is able to focus totally on the adored object, still that feeling of separateness is there. I am different, God is different, but the mind is focusing so greatly, it has become so pure, it has become so sharp. Just like in a dream, the mind conjures up the entire dream, the world of the dream, the people in the dream, the objects in the dream, they're all made of the stuff of our own mind. So just like that, this kind of very purified, very sharp mind, which has a lot of love for the deity that it is worshipping, the mind itself will take the form of the deity. Just like in the dream, the mind itself took the form of the hills or the forest or the tiger or our friend or mother or father. Like that, a very sharp, purified mind, when it is focused on an adored object and to the exclusion of everything else, then it takes up that form. Now and then, when that focus becomes very sharp and it becomes very pure, suddenly it will manifest as the adored form. But it's still in the mental realm. So Poonjaji kept repeating the Krishna mantra, and whenever his mind became very sharp, became very focused, visions of Krishna would appear. Krishna would be so, he could touch Krishna, Krishna would be there, just like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa could touch Kali, like that Punjaji could touch Krishna. So sometimes his mother would find Punjaji shouting. He has gone to bed, little boy. Just 10 minutes are over after going to bed and he is shouting and laughing. So she goes and says, what's happening? Amma, see, this Krishna is not letting me sleep. He's coming and tickling me. So this kind of scenario was there. Then Punjaji grew up, visions, intermittent visions. They would come and go. But Punjaji was always longing for that state of an 8-year-old when he had felt the bliss of the self. He had become aware of the self. For 2 days, he was in that state of bliss. He kept longing for that state of bliss. So he got married at the age of 16 itself in those days, those traditional days. Then he had to work, so he went and joined the army, British army in those days. And even there, these visions of Krishna would keep coming, so he found it difficult to perform his duties. But still, he performed his duties. And then he came back home and he wanted to find some other job because army means you have to kill. So he felt he is not able to get into that kind of state. So he was looking for some other job. And at the same time, his search became deeper and deeper. So he would travel to the Himalayas, he would travel to many great gurus, and he would tell them, see, these things are happening to me. But at the same time, I want permanent state of bliss. When Krishna comes, when he plays with me, yes, I'm blissful. But then Krishna goes away. Then I lose that bliss and I long for it again. And why should it be dependent on Krishna coming and going? At the same time, he's attached to Krishna. So all this state of conflict is going on. So every guru he goes to, they all say, you are very lucky. We have not even seen Krishna, but you are seeing Krishna. You go and be satisfied with that. So nobody is able to help him. He calls sadhus to his house, he feeds them, and then he asks them the same question, can you show me God? And every sadhu says, no, we can't show him. So this keeps going on. Then one day, one old sadhu comes to his house and Punjaji asks him to come inside and he feeds him. And he asks, can you show me God? And this old man says, I can tell you of somebody who can do it for you. Says, who? There is one Ramana Maharshi in Tiruvannamalai. Now this is Punjab and that is South India in those days of long train journeys. So if you go there, then you will, that man can show you, that sage can show you. So he tells him where to change trains, how to get to Tiruvannamalai, very detailed directions. The sadhu gives him and he goes away. So Punjaji, his thirst is very great. So immediately he finds ways and means. He's very poor, he doesn't have money. But at that time, a job offer comes from Chennai. And they give him money to travel also, and they say you can join 1 month later, but we will give you the travel allowance now itself. So he goes to Tiruvannamalai. Now I have put a photo here. Now this photo is, this photo is Punjaji in his young age. He was 34 when he went to Ramana Maharshi. This is baby Krishna. This is Punjaji when he was a spiritual master in his own right and he had thousands of disciples. This is how Ramanashram was when Punjaji went there. We see a thatched structure. Bhagwan is sitting on the cot and devotees are all sitting around. So Punjaji takes a train. He goes to Tiruvannamalai. He goes to the ashram. And he keeps his luggage in the dormitory and he walks near this darshan hall. He is just peeping inside, that's all, inside the door, and he becomes very angry. And he says, I am going back to Punjab. And he goes to the dormitory. He is again taking his luggage within 5 minutes of arriving. So an old devotee sees this and he says, what's happening? You have come all the way from Punjab. Stay for a few days. He says, no. Did you have darshan of Bhagwan? I saw him from the door. Big fraud. What? He's a big fraud. You know what he did? He came to my house in Punjab and he said, come to Tiruvannamalai, come to Ramana Maharshi. He will have answers for your questions. And I come here and I look into the hall. Same old man is sitting there, self-marketing himself. Big fraud. I'm not going to go and have his darshan. And this man says, the devotee says, no, there must be some mistake. You know, because Bhagwan has never gone out of Tiruvannamalai for the past 48 years. He has been here, never stepped out of Tiruvannamalai. I don't know what the explanation for what happened to you is, but please don't be in a hurry. Stay, have food, have the darshan of Bhagwan, then you decide what you want to do. So it happens. And finally, Punjaji goes and stands in front of Ramana Maharshi. After lunch, there is nobody in the whole darshan hall. Only Ramana is there, his attendant is there, and Punjaji is standing there. Punjaji is very angry. He says, were you the one who came to my house in Punjab and you asked me to come here and then you are sitting here? Bhagwan doesn't answer. Again, Punjaji repeats it. Bhagwan is silent. So then Punjaji moves on to the next question. He says, can you show me God? Bhagwan says, no, I cannot show you God. God is not an object to be seen. God is the subject. God is the seer. Don't bother about objects that can be seen, because whatever you can see, whatever is perceptible to the senses, mind, intellect, is not you. Find out who the seer is. You alone are God. Punjaji, who is used to adoring Lord Krishna as external to himself, he is not happy with this answer. At the same time, Bhagwan is looking deep into Punjaji's eyes. Bhagwan's gaze is supposed to be, I don't have words to describe it. Every single devotee who writes about Bhagwan, who talks about Bhagwan, talks about this wonderful gaze of Bhagwan. So Bhagwan is looking deep into the eyes of Punjaji, and Punjaji feels changes are happening. Somewhere, spiritual heart, he says, I can't explain. It was neither within me nor outside me. It was a downturned bud. Suddenly, it turned upwards and blossomed. All the hair on my body stood up. My body started trembling. But so strong is the conditioning of my mind, his teachings. I said, this man is talking nonsense. I don't want to be honey. I want to taste honey. I don't want to be honey. So he sees what is happening also. He saw people are just sitting. They are sitting in self-awareness, but he doesn't know. To him, anybody doing sadhana must have a japamala. They must be doing sadhana, because Punjaji had been doing 50,000 japas every day, repetition of Krishna mantra. With every in-breath, every out-breath. Every day we breathe around 24,000 times. So with every in-breath, every out-breath, he would synchronize the repetition of the mantra. That is approximately 50,000 repetitions a day. So he was doing 50,000 repetitions every day. To him, japa was everything. And he does not want to be God. He wants to see God. So even though all these wonderful things are happening to him, his mind, his conditioning is rejecting it. And then he goes away from the ashram. He has 1 month leave before he needs to join the new job. So he goes away to the other side of the hill. And in the forest, he is just getting food from somewhere, staying in the forest under the trees. Krishna comes, Krishna plays. So like that, 1 month is almost over. He has to go back. Then he thinks, okay, I owe that little courtesy to that old man. Let me say I'm going and then go. So he comes back. Again, it is after lunch hour. There is nobody there except the attendant, and he's standing there. Then Bhagwan gives him a wonderful cue to say whatever he wants to say. Bhagwan says, Are, where were you all this time? So Punjaji says, I was on the other side of the hill. What were you doing? I was playing with Krishna. And in his mind, Punjaji is thinking, I play with Krishna. This old man, he doesn't even see Krishna. So I am superior. I was playing with Krishna. Bhagwan says, oh, you're playing with Krishna? Okay, good, good. Where is your Krishna now? No, now he is not there. He comes when he wants and he goes away when he likes. I don't have control over it. Then Bhagwan says, what is the use of a God who comes and goes? If it is real God, he should be with you all the time. How can he come and go? So Punjaji doesn't like this kind of questioning. He goes away. He takes blessings of Bhagwan and goes away. And he continues his japa. Then after some time, one day, suddenly, there is a knock on the door. He does japa. After coming home, he does japa every day till 2 o'clock in the morning. He sits in his puja room and he is doing japa. At 1 o'clock or 1:30 early morning, everybody is sleeping. There is a knock on the door. So Punjaji opens the door and he sees Ram outside the door. He says it was like a transparent form, semi-transparent forms. Through them, I could see what was behind them, and they were standing there. They blessed me and they went away. So after that, Punjaji is sitting for japa. He is not able to repeat the mantra. He tries to read. He can't read. Mind is utterly quiet. Then he goes back to Ramanashram and he asks Bhagwan, see, this is happening to me. Every day I was repeating 50,000 times. I can't repeat even once now. My mind is deeply quiet, very peaceful, but I am not able to even bring the image of Krishna to my mind. What is happening to me? So Bhagwan asked him, when you came by train, after it reached Tiruvannamalai, did you continue to sit in the train or did you get down? Punjaji says, I got down, Bhagwan. Bhagwan says, japa was a vehicle for you. Adoring Krishna was your sadhana. It was a vehicle. It was a means. You came. Just like you came in the bullock cart when you reached the ashram, you got down from the bullock cart. So the work of the japa is done. You have arrived. You have arrived. Last time you came here, self-enquiry happened to you. You have arrived. And then Bhagwan again looks at him. And Punjaji says, how can I describe what happened to me? I can only describe peripheral things. Every cell in my body was getting purified. I can only describe peripheral things like how peaceful it was, how quiet it was, how blissful it was. But still I am not able to describe the core experience. Because with a sudden shock, I realized I recognized myself. I recognized that Ramana Maharshi in front of me was also the self. And I have always been the self. I have never not been the self. Only I didn't recognize it earlier. Now suddenly I recognized it. And he says, it was permanent. When I was 8 years old, I had this experience of peace and bliss, but it lasted for 2 days. But now I was established there forever, ever peaceful, ever blissful. So Punjaji was able to visit Bhagwan whenever he got leave. Then later he went back to Pakistan on Bhagwan's advice because his family was there. And he became a great master in his own right. And this is his own narration. And he says, what I realized when I recognized myself, what I realized was, if I could have asked, who am I earlier? if I could have asked myself with great intensity the question of who am I could have arrived there much faster. So some amount of purification is required. But if we become over-attached to the vehicle, to the means of sadhana itself, then it can become a hurdle. I had become attached to the vehicle after its job was done. And Bhagavan took me out from the coils of that attachment. What was supposed to be the means to freedom actually became shackles which held me back after a certain point. So Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, they are required up to a certain point. When the point of purification is reached, we need to, self-enquiry will take us quickly to the goal. So Punjaji said, Japa helped me. It helped to purify my mind. And because of that, it became a fit receptacle to go into self-enquiry. And through self-enquiry, I was able to reach the goal. But after a certain amount of purification, if I had gone on to self-enquiry without being attached to Japa, I could have got there faster, is what I realized, says Punjaji. So we will just chant the shloka once again now at the end of the session, so that we have understood its meaning. Uttamastavat ucchamandatah, uttamastavat ucchamandatah, chittajam japa dhyanamuttamam, chittajam japa dhyanamuttamam. Better than hymns of praise is repetition of the name. Better low voiced than loud. Chanting born in the heart is even better. To meditate is the best of all. So this is the shloka. So if we have any questions, we can take a couple of questions or one question. I think we are almost done for time, and then do 5 minutes of meditation. I will just stop sharing. 1 minute. Let me stop sharing. So I can see the chat window also. Okay. Please, you can type or you can ask if you have a question. Who is Paramatma, is it? Paramatma? Who is Paramatma, you're asking? So Paramatma is the self. The self that is everywhere all the time. The same self is in every being, because that powers all the instruments that we have is powered by the self. It is in the microcosm and in the macrocosm. So I am that Paramatma. I have always been that. I have always been the self that is infinite. But out of wrong conditioning or wrong belief system, I started believing I am only this body, mind, and intellect. At some stage, somewhere, this wrong belief system came in. It happens to us in life also, no? We believe in something that it is only this way. I'm not talking about God or religious beliefs. It can even be like earlier people believed that sun was going around the earth, sun was revolving around the earth. and people did research, and they taught us in school that the earth is moving around the sun. Now we are not astronauts, we have not gone into outer space and watched this happening. We have not done the research. But somebody told us it is like this, and we corrected the belief. Somebody till then had believed sun goes around the earth. When all the proof was in front of them, many of them out of strong conditioning, they rejected it. We know people got burnt. Scientists who were investigating this and who came up with this concept actually got burnt, etc. But one belief, wrong belief, there it really doesn't matter. The sun goes around the earth, earth goes around the sun, our day-to-day life is not affected. But here, if I believe that I am only this body, mind, and intellect and nothing else, then my existence becomes so limited, and everything that happens to the body, I feel it's happening to me. If we watch constantly, our definition of who I am is shifting. When I'm hungry, I say I am hungry. I'm talking about the body. I'm identifying with the body. I say I am bored. I'm identifying with the mind. I say I'm confused. I'm identifying with the intellect. So constantly we are shifting, identifying with the body or mind or intellect. But we have forgotten that we are the self. It is amnesia. And Vedanta is telling us it is temporary amnesia. You are Paramatma. You yourself are Paramatma. You are the self. But you have forgotten. So the entire sadhana process is only to remember, is only to recognize. We had cognized, but we have forgotten. So we recognize it. Once again, we cognize what is our true nature. So that which is powering everything that we do, that is Paramatma. That which is powering everything that is happening in the universe, that is Paramatma. As long as who is offering, to whom are we offering our results? Is there a higher power controlling us? Bless us according to karma, who is blessing us? Actually, our own past deeds come back as our destiny. There is nobody controlling our destiny. Bhagavan has made it very clear, Vedanta makes it very clear. Your own action will come back later as your destiny. Only when it comes back, it depends. The circumstances should be right. The people, because of whom that karma has to come back to us, should be there at that time. So when Dasharatha asks Krishna, why did my 100 sons get killed in the war? Krishna says, you know, once long ago, when you were a hunter, you had killed 100 birds in the forest. I forgot exactly how he kills them, but he is responsible for the death of 100 baby birds of some two birds. And that curse comes to him. Now it's not a curse actually. He has to experience that same loss because he was not sensitive. And he killed the baby birds, fledglings of birds. So he had to understand, he had to get empathy about what those birds went through. But it was after many lifetimes that these Kaurava sons were born and they could die. So Krishna said, so first you had to get enough punya, you had to do enough good deeds so that you could have 100 sons. And then you could experience that bad karma of killing those 100 baby birds could come back to you only when you had acquired enough punya to get those 100 sons. Then that experience of losing the 100 sons came to you. So whatever we have done, it doesn't mean it will come back immediately. First of all, we should be strong enough to take that if it is a bad karma. It is a process of learning, that's all. It is not reward or punishment also. What we have done, it comes back. So if it is something insensitive behavior, hurtful behavior, we understand why the other person got hurt through experiencing it ourselves, and then we stop doing it. So whatever happens when we offer our results to God, you're asking, to whom do we offer? As long as I feel I am the body, mind, and intellect, I feel that I relate to a form that I call God, and I relate to a higher power. I feel somebody is controlling my life. So whatever I feel is controlling my life, I'm not able to gauge it. I'm not able to experience it through my senses, mind or intellect. But I make a concept, I relate to a form, and then I say, I offer my actions to you. As long as I keep identifying with my body, mind, and intellect, I need another form to which I can offer the fruits of my action. What is different between me and Lord Krishna? Like I said, Lord Krishna is the form. See, the essence in any form of or any deity is consciousness. It is the self. The essence in me is the self. The forms are different, but the essence is the same. So that is what Vedanta is saying. The essence in your mother, the essence in your father, the essence in the image that you are worshipping. Everywhere it is only consciousness. Everywhere it is only the self. There are not multiple selves. There is only one self. Just like there are not multiple sleepers. You have gone to sleep. In your dream, many people come. Animals may come, houses may come. All that is coming only from the mind of one sleeper. You are sleeping, and all that is coming from your mind. Like that, there is only one self. Entire creation is a manifestation of that one self. So that one self is present in every element of manifestation. So it is present in every body, mind, and intellect. It is present in, you make a form and you say this form is Krishna, this form is Ganesha, this form is Jesus Christ, this form is something else. And that form is actually a reflection of your own self. It is a reflection of your true nature. In you, you can see so many faults, so you don't feel that you are divine. But in that form, you have attributed all the qualities of the self to that form, and you are seeing the reflection of your own self in that form, and you are feeling that that is God. But in essence, everything is only the self. So I hope I have answered. There is not too much time, but I don't Krishna power to disappear and appear in dreams. Actually, if you want, you can give me a call and we can discuss this over the phone. I'll just type my number here.